Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today's video, I'm taking a break from the drama now. I obviously do think that everything that's currently happening in Modern Concert Champions is a good thing, and that everybody's voicing their frustrations. It's needed, and as I already have done on the channel, and I'm sure I'm gonna end up making another video about the whole thing. But meanwhile, I just decided to focus on something that I enjoy about the game, not to go completely crazy and sour here sitting on lockdown. So without further ado, we're going to talk about some of my favorite nodes in Modern Concert Champions. I'm going to focus on 5. Well, maybe there's going to be a bit more than 5, but I'm going to get to it later. So either way, we're going to start with Supernova, and these nodes will not be ranked in any kind of like particular order. They're just 5 of my favorite nodes, some of the nodes that bring the biggest kind of like joy to me when I'm playing Modern Concert Champions. We're going to start with Supernova. So when the attacker activates a buff or places a debuff while fighting as Venom, Venom Pull, Venom the Duck, or the Thing, it triggers twice. Now it's a very specific node, only available in variant 2. And only affecting obviously 4 champions is listed here. But all in all, this node made variant 2 feel so much more fun once you actually get to use and abuse it. It just elevated Venom and Venom the Duck to such an incredibly high kind of like standards, and gave them so much more potential, so much more damage output. There are more and more ways how to like abuse these nodes. For instance, with Venom, you can drop a heavy attack and then you get to re-roll which buff you get, but it technically counts as activating a new buff. So for instance, you could just spam 5 heavy attacks and immediately find yourself with being the 6, 7, 8, 9 buffs immediately, kind of like at the beginning of the fight, thus severely accelerating his damage and speed and ramp up. And as well, obviously, when you place the debuff on opponent, such as bleed, you place double them. So when you place like 3 bleeds, it's immediately 6, and the damage goes through the roof. And I overall think this is a like fantastic idea for all of the contests, and I wish we could see many more of these nodes. For instance, like if an X-Men character places a bleed on opponent, you gain a Fury buff, or when an Avenger inflicts stun, you gain X amount of power, or something that can completely change some good or mediocre champions into real powerhouses. And I think the concept that we had here with variant 2 and with variant 3, why buffing Sentinel, is a very cool idea how to bring some champions, at least for a moment, for a while, kind of like in forefront of attention, and let them kind of like shine when otherwise they couldn't, because they would be in a shadow of like god tiers or beyond god tiers. So yeah, this node definitely is kind of like exciting, fun, interesting, lets you use champions you otherwise wouldn't. So it's a great thing for Marvel Contests of Champions, and I wish they would do much more of this. So next we're going to move on to the next, and actually here is the biggest cheat that I'm going to commit in this video, and it's these energy adoption nodes, adaptation nodes, or energy adoption, yes. So we have energy adoption ice, energy adoption fire, and energy adoption lightning, and all of them are extremely similar. They basically place these debuffs on you whenever you make contact with the opponent, and you can switch them off via armor break or via bleed or via poison. Basically, if you inflict poison an opponent, then you do not get shock debuffs on you anymore. And at the same time, if you happen to inflict shock on the opponent, then gain regeneration. So the best part about these nodes, and the only thing that actually made these nodes work as well as they did, is the fact that those shock, cold snap, or incinerate debuffs don't actually deal that much damage to you, and you are able to kind of like mitigate the damage via willpower, and some occasions actually heal if your champion has like high energy resistance, which is another kind of interesting layer. Because yeah, if you bring in a champion with high energy resistance, you're going to be healing more. If you bring in champion with no energy resistance, you can pretty much lose much more health than you can gain if you play normally. And at the same time, if you manage those debuffs on you, keep it at 1 or 2 at a time and slow play, then you can heal up. And that's cool because you're saving potions and gaining health. At the same time, you can bring in champions that can abuse these mechanics or benefit from them, like Havoc, for instance, can go in a turbo mode. Like Silver Surfer immediately becomes a much more kind of like attractive option for here. Corvus can do a lot of cool things, so on and so forth. So I think these were some of the best nodes introduced in 6.4 in general, and I had most fun in this map in particular, largely because of these nodes, because I could use the champions again, that might not necessarily be the best champions, like even Silver Surfer has a use here, or Havoc, which is a great champion, but maybe not necessarily the best for everything in game. But here he was absolutely in the forefront and shining through. So it also enabled me to use champions in the way that I didn't think I would or was possible before. For instance, Taskmaster here. Taskmaster can go completely debuff immune very quickly thanks to these nodes, which is again an awesome, interesting thing. And it just enabled and kind of like opened up some of the champions even further to a point which we can hardly ever see with any other node combination. So all of these nodes I was super happy to play about, because there's the benefiting if you play it right, thus like supercharging Havoc, or Silver Surfer gains benefits or whatever. There are ways how to counter them, as in like if you bring a champion that inflicts poison here, for instance, you can just completely shut the node off. And there is the punishment if you don't listen to anything and ignore it and happen to inflict the shock on opponent, then opponent regenerates and the fight is significantly harder. So all in all, this kind of like combines a lot of the aspects that I would like to see in more and more nodes in the game, where there's a relatively large amount of champions that can deal with these nodes. You can bring in almost everybody and just slow play it and just kind of like have a worse time than you normally would, but still get by if you have to. And it just places these debuffs on you that like, yeah, lets you heal. And it's just very large amount of interesting interactions that I was super happy to be able to explore and that I hadn't been able to try previously. So yes, I think this is awesome, and this is some of the coolest, most fun node design that has come out of 6.4 and maybe Act 6 in general. Okay, so next, again, I'm gonna be cheating a bit, and it's gonna be these Aggression Fury and Aggression Regeneration nodes. And again, these nodes are very similar in the sense that you can choose to ignore it and just like be super aggressive, and then the node doesn't really have like much implications in like a generic kind of matchup. So Aggression Fury or Aggression Regeneration can bring in any champion, fight it, and ignore it. It's there, it's something to keep in back of the mind. Obviously it's something that forces you to be more aggressive or just prolongs the fight if they do manage to get some regen stacks, but you can use anybody. Then you can deal with this node, for instance, by simply activating heal block, right? It doesn't matter how many aggression regeneration stacks they have if you have a heal block active on them. Thus there is like an alternative option how to deal with this node, and that is by heal block, which inherently kind of like stops healing in the game, or like passive healing or abilities that hinder healing. So there's additional kind of like outlet of champions that are viable and like kind of have advantage in these matchups. And at the same time, there are champions that can take the absolute mickey and absolutely cheese plenty of these fights. Obviously, that will not always be possible. You can place somebody that inherently could destroy your counter or just make the fight incredibly difficult by adding extra nodes. But in like a baseline vanilla scenario, you can bring in Captain America Infinity War, get a Despair debuff, have everything set up, and just absolutely cheese the node by using it against the opponent. Same as Void. Bring in Void, wait for those debuffs to stack, and just watch opponent melt away. And this is, again, some of the most interesting stuff I have done in Marvel Concept Champions, and whenever I do get a chance to do so, whether I always do it on the outside, but there's always a smile on me, like from ear to ear, as a 5-year-old child on an inside of being able to kind of like abuse the node and find the system or whatever. So again, this is an enjoyable experience because you can be rewarded by bringing in counters that kind of like directly benefit from this node. You can use pretty much any champion if you want to and just try and ignore the node and be aggressive and play around it. And you can be punished by this node if you kind of like let it get out of hand. For instance, in Aggression Fury, if you let opponent gain all of those Fury buffs, then you take a hit in a block and it's, oh my god, it hurts. Everybody's been there. Opponent 7 Furies from Aggression Fury, try to parry and dang, half your health is gone. So that is extremely punishing if you do not kind of like deal with the node in appropriate manner. So yeah, absolutely enjoy these type of nodes as well. To a degree, for instance, Aggression Armor can be really fun with Venom the Duck. And I do understand like that these are like cheese methods and they're not necessarily always the best thing for the game. But as I said, you can always modify the fight so you can't cheese, let's say, entire lane where this is, or entire fight where these nodes are available, because there are champions that are immune to, for instance, the healing ability reduction or whatever, and these aggression fury as well. There are ways how to counter it, but at the same time, when you do pull off like that electro handle trick, it's just so awesome, it's so great. It makes you feel cool, so I definitely do enjoy it. More so probably aggression regeneration, because there are many more options to deal with this. And yeah, so let's move on to the next node, and next node is Resistor, and there are more nodes that could qualify for the same, but I just used Resistor as like a very good example. And those are the nodes that let opponent gain a whole bunch of buffs, because that obviously absolutely opens up most of the Mystic characters and let them overperform significantly, like Morningstar level 2s where you nuke the opponents with like half health with one level 2, or Ronan just completely stunlock, bring in your like 3-star Ronan, 4-star Ronan, stunlock the opponent and just whack at them till they drop. And again, there can be these node combinations which prevent you doing these fights. For instance, I don't know, Resistor and stun immunity. You can bring in Ronan, right? You can bring in some of the Mystic champions. Immune to Nullify. You can still somehow find ways how to use and even use the fact that the opponent has a lot of buffs. And it's interesting because it opens up champions and kind of like lets their potential shine, and like bring in long shot and opponents just melt away, for instance, right? But at the same time, you can still use any champion you want, just deal with the node, deal less damage. Or in these resistant nodes, for instance, you can bring in any champion, or if you want to have an easier time, bring in champions that rely on damage over time, that's effectively bypassing the physical or energy resistance. So there are a multitude of ways how to deal with this. It does make for like a slower, dragged out fight if you're unprepared, if you just bring in your regular team. But at the same time, it opens an alleyway of different champions that could potentially get their abilities kind of like supercharged, and you just absolutely love it. Bring in Morningstar, like who doesn't have a smile on their face when they shoot off a big Morningstar level 2, or when they have like a nice solid amount of damage and they're Ronin with a stun lock, or yeah, Longshot, for instance, drop a big level 2 and see just health absolutely melt away. Those are some of the most satisfying things in the game. Now again, I'm not saying that these are necessarily the best node designs or the most balanced things in the game, but these things do generally put a smile on my face. And moving on, Iker is another node that's, in my opinion, is extremely fun and interesting, because again, you can use any champion and play around the node via dropping your heavy attacks, that's getting rid of the fury buffs, and that's pretty much kind of like ignoring the node or playing around it, quote unquote, with any champion. At the same time, you get punished if you get stuck with these fury buffs and you get this degeneration on you and you lose a lot of health, and it's extremely painful, and you can like just lose the fight extremely quickly if you kind of get caught with your pants off, so to speak. And at the same time, there are obviously champions who can abuse and use these nodes more so than others. For instance, Taskmaster again gains an ability to go completely debuff immune. There's Corvus, there's Ghost, who gains access to so much more damage. There's Captain Marvel Movie. Hulk, Ronan with their reliable stuns can absolutely abuse this stuff. Then you have champions like Killmonger and Void. That synergy combination is some of the most interesting things that can happen in game, because you can bring in Killmonger and Void, and that's an insane kind of like fight escalation, because everything's happening so quick. You gain all of these degens. Sometimes you lose a whole bunch of health and nearly kind of like die from it. Then sometimes you regen back to full instantly almost. You consistently gain power thanks to Killmonger's kind of like ability to gain power whenever debuffs are placed. So you just drop special after special. And it's an exciting time. It's kind of like a lottery in a sense, because you don't know whether that synergy will trigger or not. But it's just extremely interesting. And again, as I mentioned, you can use any champion and still benefit from this node, or still be punished by this node if you get caught with it. So it's just very exciting to see the champions that never got access to big yellow numbers being all of a sudden able to kind of like punch like a Rocky. So it just yeah, makes me happy. That's about it. And next note, I must apologize for the quality of the picture. I couldn't find like a better picture online, and I didn't remember where else I could see this note. I think as I'm recording this video, I think it is somewhere in 6.1, but I'm not entirely sure. But this note is what I mainly remember from dungeons, and that is quite simple. For the first 5 seconds, both champions are indestructible, after which both champions' attacks deal damage equal to their current health. So my apologies if the writing on the note is bad and you can't read it. But the base idea is, yes, you start the fight indestructible, so there's your opponent for 5 seconds, and as soon as that drops off, every time you deal damage to your opponent, instead of what damage you normally deal, you deal your current health as damage. So that basically opens this crazy idea where if opponent touches you once, you're dead, because typically your opponent's health is going to be higher than yours. And at the same time, it enables you to finish off the fight extremely quickly against your opponent. So it's just kind of like very heightened, elevated sense of oh my god, do not screw up. And it's very exciting. It kind of like gets your heart pumping. It's like, don't make mistakes, be perfect, because you're gonna get punished extremely hard for messing up. Even if opponent so much as touches your block, you're dead. So you know that it's kind of like high stakes, high reward kind of situation. And yeah, absolutely love it, man. I find it super exciting. Obviously, this is another node that can be completely cheesed by different champions. For instance, Quake can destroy opponents on this one, and so on and so forth. So it's not necessarily the most balanced or node, or the node that should be kind of like used everywhere. But at the same time, whenever I do get to see this node, it's kind of like part of me getting super excited, part of me getting a bit like, you know, worried, scared of messing up. But one thing's for sure, it gets kind of like me pumped up for the game, and it makes me enjoy playing this game. And at the end of the day, if I do make mistake, I know that I made mistake, and that's why I'm done. Like, that's why I lost the fight. I kind of like willingly accepted this idea that one mistake equals death, and like the fight rewards you also so much more damage for playing it right. But yeah, these are just some of my favorite node examples. I'm not saying like there aren't many others that are absolutely fantastic. In fact, I'm probably forgetting quite a whole lot of different extremely interesting nodes and kind of like interactions. So here's the question for you guys: what are your favorite nodes in Marvel Concert Champions? Why don't you leave a comment in comment section below, and we can see like where the community's interest lies, because this actually can serve as a constructive add-on to current conversations with Kabam as well, just as a showcase of the type of stuff that we love. Not necessarily the most balanced, not necessarily whatever, just the things that we enjoy, because it's important not to only talk about the negatives and whatever is going wrong, but also to talk about the things that are right, that Kabam has done right, and encourage them to do more of the same in future. All that being said, that will do for me today. And as always, if you have managed to watch the video thus far, here is a Baby Yoda spitting out a frog, because who doesn't like Baby Yoda? And apparently Baby Yoda doesn't like frogs, so it means, I guess that means that we don't like frogs anymore as well. Not entirely sure how that works. Let me know, do you like frogs? But if you didn't like the video, then you're welcome to share yourselves out. I will not miss you. At the same point, that is me done for today, and I'll catch you guys soon. See ya.